Hello and welcome to this series of dplyr. Dplyr is a language of data manipulation which consists of various action verbs like select, arrange, filter, mutate, summarize, and many more. Today's video is about the left join in dplyr. So let's get started. So very quickly, let's see what's a left-hand join. Let's say that we got two datasets or two tables. We can refer that the first table as left table and the second one as the right table. And our aim is to join those tables together so that it becomes a bigger table which carries all the information. So in this example, we have two tables which has the patient information. The first table has the patient age and outcome, and the second table contains their blood pressure readings. So what happens when we join them together? So the information comes from the first table as well as from the second table. For example, the SBP, DBP comes from the second table. In this example, we would be using the patient ID as our key. As you can see that the patient ID P001 exists on both the sides, the left table as well as the right table. So we'll get the data from the left table, and then we will also get the matching data from the right table as well. So this is our first line which is matched. And now if we go to the second line, we have the patient ID 002 which exists on both the tables as well, and we'll be picking the data from the first table as well as from the second table. Now let's see what the third row does. Third row has 003 on the left hand side, but we can't see the matching patient ID on the right side. So we'll copy the data from the left side first, and then we'll just put NA or blanks because the data doesn't exist for P003 on the right hand side. And the same thing goes for P004. It only exists on right hand side table, not on the left side. So we won't bring that data in because this is a left hand join. So in a left hand join, all the data rows from the left side table would be shown in the final join table. But if the data only exists in the right side table, that won't appear in our final join table. Now let's do a practical example of the left hand join in R. We would use the dplyr library, and then we'll start creating some data sets. So here is a first data set called D1. So this has some data for patients, the patient ID, age, and outcomes. The second data set contains the patient blood pressures, their SPP and DBP readings. The third data set contains the weight of the patient. And the fourth contains the heart rate of the patients. So let's have a quick look at all the four data sets which we created. We have D1, D2, D3, and D4, and you notice that patient ID is the key in the first three tables, and on the last one I've used pat ID as the key. So here is our first attempt of joining the two tables using a left join. So here is the syntax, p left. I'm saying left join using the two tables D1 and D2, and we are joining it by the key, which is the patient ID. Remember, in both the tables we have the patient ID as the key. And here is our left join data. You can see that the data has been pulled from both the tables. The first table had age and outcome, and the second table had the SPP and DBP. And you would notice that in our final table we just have the patient ID shown once because that was the key in both the tables. Now let's try to join the three tables together, D1, D2, and D3, and let's see if it works or not. So if I run this syntax using the three tables, you would notice that this syntax is not going to work. So if I run it, you would get exactly the same data. So it has only joined the first two tables. See that we don't have any data from the third table. So let's not use this syntax, and we'll explore the proper syntax for using more than two tables. When joining more than two tables, I prefer to use this syntax. So using D1 as our original data, which is on the left hand side. So starting with D1, we are doing a left join for D2 using the patient ID as the key, and then doing another line saying D3, and again joining it by the patient ID. So if I run it now, so if we look at the result now, we would notice that we have the extra column called weight, which has come from our third table or D3. So now let's try to join all the four data sets together. So starting with the first data set D1, and doing a left join with D2 using the patient ID as the key. Similarly, D3, patient ID as the key. In the fourth one, you notice that I've used a different syntax. And the reason is that in the first data set, which is D1, the patient ID is the key. But in the fourth data set, we have a pat ID column, which is our unique key. So we have to spell out both the keys like this. So when we run this command, we would get this data set, which has the output from all the 4 tables. So now you're going to ask a question, what if there's multiple keys in your data set? For example, in this data, we have patient ID and the visit ID as our key. A patient goes to hospital multiple times, so each time a patient goes to hospital, there's a different visit ID for them. So let's see how we can join these kind of data together. Let's create our second table also, which will have multiple keys. So it has pat ID and the VST ID as the key. And then you have the age and the cost of the patient visit in that. So essentially, the joining mechanism remains the same. So we would use the syntax where we define both the keys together, and we would actually have combined data. You can notice that we have age being represented again, so age.x and age.y, and the reason is that in both the tables we had the age column, and that's why, to distinguish between the age from the first table and the second table, it has put x and y, age.x and age.y. So if you don't want to see the age column coming as twice, you can remove the age from the second dataset, or the D2, by deselecting it using select open brackets minus age, and everything else remains the same. So let's run this syntax, and you will notice that the age only appears once, and that's appearing from the first table, or the left hand side table, which is called DX in our case. I hope you found this information useful and practical. Thank you very much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.